If you don't figure out the story beats of your comic, you will not see it through to the end, and you'll end up with a load of unfinished projects or a comic that is stuck in place. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what you need before you commit to your comic so that you can actually follow it through with no obstacles. Your future self will thank you. And I'll give you a recommendation of some software that I picked up at the end of this video. Now, the first thing that you need is a script. I know that's obvious, but a surprising amount of comic creators will only have a script like fully realized for one chapter or maybe one or two issues. The rest of the story is kind of vague. You sort of know where you're going, but you just haven't figured out all the beats. And this is a mistake. Imagine that you're going on holiday, so you jump in the car and you drive to the garage to fill the car up. You know where the garage is and you know what you're going to do when you get to the garage. Fill up the car and buy a questionable sandwich. But you haven't actually figured out where you're going beyond the garage to actually get to your destination holiday. But you kind of know it's north, so you drive in that general direction, you get lost, and you get eaten by cannibals. We've all done it. That's what not figuring out the script, or at least the story beats to your narrative, is like. I'm planning a trilogy of books for my comic that will clock in at about 200 pages in total. And I have scripted the entire thing, which means I know exactly where I'm going with the story, so I can put all of my energy into the visuals rather than worrying about which direction I'm heading in. Or cannibals. But what if you don't want to do that? A lot of people don't like to script everything out, and I sympathize. I also know that a single YouTube video is not going to change a habit of a lifetime for you, but luckily there is a workaround. At the very least, if you're not going to do the full script, figure out the beats of your story. I've already done a video on the Save the Cat story beats method, which I really recommend you watch after this because it's what I used to create my comic and I found it really, really helpful. Another upshot of figuring out the story beats of your comic is that you can get a better idea and understanding of how many characters you should introduce and when. This is really important because characters can actually bloat the story, especially when you introduce too many too quickly. And that can be a huge pacing issue, which is one of the biggest issues that a lot of comic creators have, certainly the ones that I talk to. The other problem here is that if you have too many characters, then your audience isn't really going to know which ones are important. And they're not going to have enough time to care about them, and they'll become overwhelmed as a reader, which means they'll either stop reading altogether or they just won't really remember anything about your comic when they're finished. But what you can do as the creator is use your story beats to audit your characters, which is a lot more fun than it sounds, I promise. Here's what you do. Write down all the characters you have in your comic and then write down what their role is within the narrative. For example, you've got your protagonists, your villains, the mentor, the gatekeeper, and so on. Next, write down how they move the narrative forwards. So let's say that your protagonist is going to face the villain, but they lose the first fight. So they have to train in order to beat them. Well, you need the mentor character for that, so they stay. But maybe before your protagonist finds the mentor to train them, they go on a separate adventure where they meet the gatekeeper and a henchman and a new faction with interesting lore to discover. And then they meet the mentor. Now, do you need all of that to get to the next beat? Well, only you can really answer that, but I'd suggest not, because the purpose of the beat is to show the protagonist training to beat the villain, right? Adding in all that other stuff might be really interesting to you and you might really love those characters, but if it's going to distract away from the main story and slow everything down, is it worth keeping? And more importantly, is it going to sabotage your comic by putting the audience off? Killing your darlings is really hard, so you have my sympathies, but I have more good news for you. If you created a character that kind of slows everything down, but you absolutely love the character, or you've created a world that is packed full of interesting lore that you want to explore, you can keep both of those things as well, and not have it slow down or potentially threaten your comic story. Remember this, not everything that you make for your comic needs to feature within the comic. Understanding that makes it a lot easier to either cut characters completely from the main story or reduce their role significantly, especially if it means that you're preserving the pacing of the story. Here are some ideas for you to preserve your best ideas and best characters. You can create a character book where you tell us about their lore and their backstory and how they lost their eye in the Great War. This stuff is what fans of your comic are going to love, but the mainstream audience, the cold fans who haven't really read much of your stuff, probably won't care about as much. So you're splitting the audience between the people who aren't fans yet and the people who are fans. But you can also use all of that extra stuff that you've created for marketing for your comic. Post something on social media about how your character lost the eye or why these former lovers became enemies. Good marketing is primarily about storytelling anyway, and you're already a storyteller. And if you have lots of characters that you haven't really used that much, or you want to explore them a little bit more, create spin-offs. That's more stuff to market, more stuff to potentially sell. So nothing gets wasted. Remember, all of this comes back to figuring out the beats of your comic. Ideally, you want most, if not all, of the script written before you start, but at the very least, get the beats done. Now, I don't have every single little minute thing figured out for my comic before starting. That's planning to the extreme. Even I don't like planning that much. I haven't modeled every single big environment, and there are 1 or 2 characters that I've left to figure out design-wise too. But I've started my comic anyway because I know exactly where I'm going with it. I know who the main characters are, who the secondary characters are, and who the tertiary characters are. I also have options for spin-offs, and I know which characters that I would choose to do spin-offs or to create supplementary content if I want to further explore lore or character relationships. All of this is to say that if you can figure out the narrative beats, then you have some structure that you can work with, and you have a direction that you're going in, and so it's less likely that you're going to feel overwhelmed. Now, when it comes to software, I actually have 2 recommendations, not 1. The first one kind of is software, but it kind of isn't because it's within the browser, and that is Notion. Now, Notion is free, and you can build pretty much whatever you want within it. So I use Notion to house my script, my character references, my plot beats as well, my design Bible, and I use it to track my progress and as like a journal as well. It's kind of like the one-stop shop for everything that you need for your comic. You can get an app like on your phone or tablet or whatever, and it synchronizes with the browser-based version as well. So I really recommend that if you feel in particular that you find comics become bloated and overwhelmed and you kind of lose track of things. It's a really good way to centralize everything so you know exactly what you're doing. The second bit of kit I'm recommending is Clip Studio Paint X. So I'm not sponsored by Clip Studio at all. I'm not doing affiliate marketing with them or anything like that. But I have been using Clip Studio for years and years and years. I think it's the best comic creating software out there by far. But I wasn't ready to upgrade to Clip Studio Paint X because I wasn't really sure why I needed it. And I thought, screw it, let's give it a go. I've heard really good things. And if you've ever used InDesign before, or a program like InDesign, it's like Clip Studio Pro and InDesign had a baby, and that's what Clip Studio X is. It's fantastic to have your entire comic just on screen and one file to open. That was a huge selling point for me. So you're not opening individual files for each individual page, which is what I would do. You're opening one file and it's got all the pages there, and you just click and choose which page you want to work on. I really recommend getting it if you can afford it. And so far, I'd say it's been a worthwhile investment for me. But before you invest in any new bit of kit, figure out the story beats for your comic first. Do your homework, and then go and buy the shiny toys, or Notion, which is free. And watch this video next to see how you can do that really easily.